Welcome to ReReview, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we love the films from our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. On this episode, we are discussing They Live. It's released in 1988, directed by John Carpenter, starring Roddy Piper, Keith David, and Meg Foster. This movie tells the story of a construction worker uncovering the ugly truth of the world. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 34-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. Bobby, you chose this one, so what made you select They Live?
A while back, I used to work at this retail store, and I knew this guy who said, "You have to watch They Live," and that's pretty much the only thing I remember about this guy. I don't remember his name. I don't remember who he was. I don't remember anything about this guy. So his legacy for me is watch They Live, and
I
so
mean,
I did.
that's kind of awesome. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, can you imagine having a legacy like that in somebody's life where the only thing they remember about you is just watch a movie and that's it? So I watched the movie and it stuck with me and I thought it was worth watching again. I mean, it's very interesting. It's definitely reached, I don't know, what would we call it, a cult status type of movie? It definitely has some kind of lexicon to it.
Cult status makes sense to me just because, from a pop culture standpoint, there's so many things that I personally didn't realize came out of this film that I'm like, oh, this is where everyone got it from.
And I don't know if there's like previous examples of it. Of course, there's I'm here to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of bubble gum. And we mentioned like it's kind of like a very quotable movie, and it seems like it's very one-liner based, a lot of it.
How much of that is because Roddy Piper isn't exactly the thespian?
Yeah, that it's funny because the bubblegum line, if I remember correctly, was ad-libbed from Roddy Piper, and I think it was something like a line that like he'd come up with for his wrestling career. And so like I supposedly had like a notebook or something like that of these one-liners he would use, back during, the 80s and 90s of wrestling, and he used it for this. But you're right, it's entirely possible that it was to cover up for the lack of acting ability for Roddy Piper.
Wait, are you saying that the entire script was his one-liners from his wrestling days?
For him, maybe.
It kind of reminded me of like Terminator, how he was kind of like a walking robot. He could have been just as much an alien as a lot of the other characters.
Oh, the big reveal. There's the spoil.
The big reveal, the spoil.
No, I don't think that's a spoiler, because the one thing I remember the most from this movie, besides the quotable lines, is the poster, which is a close up of Roddy Piper with the sunglasses tilted down, and you see the reflection of the alien. So, I don't know if that poster was on the initial release or maybe like a re-release or DVD release or something like that. It was, I mean, I was 3 when this movie came out, so I'm not sure exactly what the initial, release of it would have been. But I mean, that would have given it away pretty much right away. But in the context of this movie, it does seem to happen pretty deep into it. Maybe even like a quarter of the way into it.
It's pretty far in. We watched a lot of really slow, droning, meandering, walking around a city of nondescript nature, because I still wasn't convinced it was LA. It was there was a pace to this film that you were astute enough to remind me that Carpenter films tend to follow this route. But oh boy, that lead up, it was just it hurt quite a bit for me.
They had to tell you that the economy was bad and that the aliens are sucking all the money out of the system and saving it for themselves and not giving any to the regular folk.
I feel like they communicated that. I also feel like they communicated the human nature of wanting to destroy the other.
You're not wrong.
No.
Well, so the one thing that like I watching again, and I said it when we were watching it, is, I think that with a lot of John Carpenter movies, and especially this one, you had to have seen it once already. And when you go back, you kind of understand what he's trying to show and why he's trying to. I mean, it's not, really deep as far as what he's trying to say, but the way it kind of ties into once you realize, the hidden messages, the people who are hiding in plain sight and how they're influencing the world, it does tie back into seeing this everyman with his everyman mullet and Levi jeans, I guess, which was a thing back then. Experiencing job loss and trying to find work and seeing these homeless camps that exist out there, and tying into that type of thing. He does do that in his movies. I think what this movie kind of lacked that something like, The Thing had is like an interesting, inciting incident at the beginning. The fact that we spend the first 5 to 6 minutes with this stone-faced actor in quotations walking around with the backpack, just kind of looking around, it doesn't really draw you in all that much. And might I say, not the most thrilling soundtrack ever. It does kind of drone on. And so since it doesn't have, if you think about like The Thing with, the helicopter chase with the dog, and like it kind of gets you invested it kind of has like a mystery aspect of it from the get-go, and it just kind of gets more and more intense, even though it's slow. And then it kicks into the suspicious aspect of who's the alien and whatnot. This movie didn't really have that, and so it does feel like a super slow burn, to the point that honestly it wasn't until the last third of the movie that I was actually really invested in it.
There were a lot of really strange choices in my mind. He just instantly goes, instead of like trying to figure out what's going on, he just instantly goes to, I'm going to call out whatever these things are in his mind publicly in grocery stores and on crowded city streets, and just start going off on a homicidal rampage and then kidnapping a woman, which is very uncomfortable. And then, trying to become friends with her afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about your character immediately wanting to just kill. Just like so fast. He was so quick to it, especially when he was trapped in the alleyway with the cops. And it was like, well, it was time for some wrestling moves. Because what else was going to happen at that point?
They dedicated a lot of time to that fight. And it's honestly the thing that I think, besides the bubblegum line, is culturally the thing that most people remember about this movie, besides the giant obey signs. And yeah, that was like a 7-minute fight that just kind of kept going. And at some point you're just kind of like, how is this really adding anything to the story itself?
I mean, here's my question. So if there was someone you met in your life and you got on a construction job with that person, maybe you became friends with them, and they said, hey, I really want you to put on these glasses because I think I'm seeing things. Would you fight them for 7 minutes over it?
To be fair, the dude had just murdered like 10 people with a shotgun, walked away, and then the other guy, for some reason, got his week's pay, threw it in a box, and got it, nailed it in that box. And then that same guy asked him to put on a pair of sunglasses, and he's like, I don't want anything to do with this. There was some conflicting tones there, though, to be honest.
So Holly was already bought out when he met her, right?
Yeah, it seems like it.
Dang, dude, went straight to the spoiler. Now that's the spoiler. Damn. I don't know. Do you think she was already bought out at that point, or do you think that maybe they got to her after the raid or whatever?
I feel like she was one of could have been after, right?
No, I feel like it was before. She was one of the Richies with her BMW and her like house that one side looked like it was just on a hill, and then on the other side had some like
lavish view of
giant
a very
panoramic view. Yeah. So I think
that home is selling for a lot of money today in LA.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess maybe she must have been. Maybe she's the one who tipped off the location of the get together, and that's the reason why the cops showed up and slaughtered everyone. So I guess she must have been part of it the entire time.
I thinking from the tech perspective and the things they used, I was surprised at the gore element because it seemed totally straightforward. Then all of a sudden it'd be like, whoa, things got really dark for a second there when they shot someone up.
Yeah, there was one guy who towards the end in the like good guy hideout. Like he got shot, and then the wall behind him just became painted like entirely red.
I mean,
And
from an effects perspective, I mean, everything seemed pretty straightforward. I don't think we saw anything really strange until maybe the end scene with the explosion on top of the building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was okay with that. But again, it caught me by surprise because it seemed very straightforward, especially with like the fight scene. Then all of a sudden, bullet shots made it extra gory.
Yeah. It's funny because the first time I watched this movie was on TV. And so I didn't see any of that the first time. There's a lot of stuff that they cut out. I mean, it's not a very intense movie. I mean, at the end of the day, it's John Carpenter. But he's not necessarily well known for the gore aspect as far as like, obviously the Halloween movie, isn't necessarily the goriest. I mean, obviously there's murders and stuff going on, but it's not like what, we would see in a modern horror movie, I'd say. Not a lot of blood and not people's heads exploding for sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe one of you can answer this for me because I don't know, but how much Twilight Zone influence are we talking about here? Because it felt like 100%.
I'd be curious about the origins of this, if this is purely original or if it's like based off a novella or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Well, it does seem to have basis on, various kinds of media manipulation and stuff like that. But one of the things I was interested in looking at John Carpenter's filmography, and particularly his early filmography, where he has some movies that are, some of his original ones are, there's a short called Terror from Space, and then another one called Gorgon, the Space Monster, and then Sorcerer from Outer Space, and Dark Star, and all these kinds of things. So he definitely has a,
he likes sci-fi.
Yeah, definitely. Like it has a alien kind of, like certainly like the 50s type of movie where they were, like definitely playing off of nuclear paranoia and that kind of stuff.
Well, I think, I mean, even cutting to when you had your vision through the glasses, it was black and white. So that's what really gave me that vibe, and the nature of the prosthetics and the way it looked. It just was like, oh, this feels very Twilight Zone in the way it carried through the film.
Yeah, the black and white was a really interesting idea because, I mean, one of the other things that they did in the earlier in the movie, which is pretty common, is to show what it looks like when you're looking through binoculars, which is they have the black mat of the shape of the binoculars on the shot and they just show it. But, you would expect to have something like some kind of frame or something to show that he's looking through the sunglasses. And I thought it was, to your point, a really good point that it was really interesting that they went black and white with the sunglasses point of view.
Did you care about the characters at all? Were you on board with the with the murder spree that they intended and everything that was happening?
I mean, what was interesting is I didn't understand any of their relationships either. Like I had no idea. Like so, Keith David came up in the beginning, was really nice, and said, "Hey, like, look, I could see you're like a vagrant, right? I can lead you to a place where you can stay." And then it's antagonistic from there. And then their relationship just didn't make sense to me at all. And then when he has that, I'll put it in air quotes, the relationship with the woman where he kidnaps her and then, has an interaction with her, that was very creepy and awkward. And, he was just weird.
Yeah, I mean, especially for his character, I guess. I was very surprised at Frank's passing in the film because it was so sudden that I was actually in shock. Not that I didn't think it was going to happen, but more so that I wasn't ready for it to be that quick.
I mean, well, what's interesting is that he just shoots him and then he falls off screen and then that's it. Mm-hmm. Like you would think that a character that they dedicated that much screen time to they would show falling on the ground and he would have a dramatic death scene and but no, it's like he just practically nearly dies off screen and that's just the end of it. I wonder if
There's
there
probably
was some
stuff on the cutting room floor.
yeah, I mean, I would think, but I mean, it's hard to say, but
Eh,
it just seems so abrupt to me.
I mean, I feel like this is our way of saying, man, they could have done more. And I think, Matt, I want to hear your take on, well, should they remake this? Because there seems like there's a lot that could be done to modernize this film.
It's funny because watching it again, there's obviously a lot of, a lot of things haven't changed, since the 80s or the 70s or the 60s, in the sense of government paranoia and just what is reality. So the general theme of it is universal. So you could remake it based around that. And I was actually looking it up, and it was based off of a very short story called 8 o'clock in the morning. I think it's like a 6-page short story. So it's fairly short, and it doesn't have a lot in common with what we got in this movie. As far as like the basis of how things happen, like the sunglasses doesn't seem to really be part of it. It's more about literally like a Neo Matrix. A dude wakes up and he can just see the world for how it currently is, type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the sunglasses is a pretty clever way to do it. It's a way to get make sense out of a guy who doesn't have that experience, and all of a sudden, without just waking up.
I think it'd be an excellent branding opportunity for certain sunglass manufacturers if they did do a remake. But to answer your question, yes, I do think that they could make a remake out of this. I don't think that you'd probably want to copy what this movie was. I think you'd probably want to do what a good remake should be, which is you look at the original source material that inspired it and say, what could I do with this that is modern and interesting, and get someone with some acting ability behind it. And to be honest, at this point, I would, it's funny how the filmmaking world has changed, that, this was the pinnacle of a wrestler actor, whereas now you could get a Dwayne Johnson or a John Cena, and it's not necessarily the end of the world as far as acting ability.
Oh, if you're going to juxtapose that, that is wow, that is a world of difference to think how far we've come in almost 35 years. Yeah, they are on a completely different level from what we just watched.
So yeah, I say that you could do it. I say that you need to spend more time like creating the character. To me, the one thing that he was lacking more than anything else was an actual drive. As far as I can tell, his only real drive in most of this movie was, take it to the man more than anything else. He didn't have anything really invested until like the very end. Again, the last third of the movie was when all of a sudden, like, I'm guessing that's where John Carpenter's main creativity was flowing, and everything leading up to that was, I don't know.
You mean after he joins the crew, in theory, and understands that there's a lot of people who know about this and they need to figure something out?
Even after that, it wasn't until I think after the gala, when the two of them get into the broadcast building, that you really see stuff happening.
Oh boy, that gala hurt me.
Yeah,
we're all dressed up to the nines, and all of a sudden 2 people come in totally dressed down with guns. No one appears to notice. They meet their old hobo friend. It's like, why don't I just walk you around the whole building and show you all the stuff? Am I the only one who's like, this is cool? They got like planetary travel. Why do we want to kill them?
Wow, I need to go put on my sunglasses. I think Austin might be
right.
one of the ghouls, or
right.
He's Where's in line the sunglasses?
With them. Wait, do I hear obey in the background?
I'm just saying, like, if you can move between planets, I don't know. I watched Doctor Who. This all sounds. This is up my alley.
Okay, that does bring up an interesting point of like what they even need from Earth. They can teleport to between planets. What do they need our cash for?
I mean, it was super interesting that they had this really, really, really high tech room where they can just zip by and then teleport, and then they have the other room right next to it with all these like 80s oscilloscopes and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, they're using they've used up all their super alien technology on this room over here, and they don't have anything left for the others.
They're just sprinkling their tech out to us slowly, so they try to use as much human tech as possible.
Are you guys familiar with an old TV show from 1983 called V that was remade at some point?
I feel like I
I
watched the remake, I think.
yeah,
V stood for visitors, and it was kind of the same idea. It was aliens who disguise themselves to look like humans, and they've come to purge the earth of its resources. And but it was obvious that they were aliens. It's not like this one where they were just kind of like the new War of the Worlds where they just happen to be here and nobody noticed. So there has been other stories that are pretty similar to this.
And if it's a TV series, it probably do a much better job at expanding on the idea, or maybe doing the thing that I kind of wanted. Just maybe care about the characters a little bit. Maybe throw more wrestlers at me next time. What if the whole thing was just all the WWF at the time, right?
yeah. Like every actor in it.
Every
Oh.
single one. Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
It would be great.
Do we? I will ask. I mean, it was 7 minutes of fighting, right?
Yeah, it was 6 to 7 minutes.
Was it
Solid.
Was it just as amazing for you as it was for me? Sarcasm.
Oh man, I had my hat on. I was like, yeah, Austin's out. No. It's funny because just like with Bobby and being told by somebody to watch it, probably enthusiastically, I would assume, not in the same category of somebody saying, "Hey, go watch The Room," right? It's somebody probably legit thought it was a great movie and was trying to get you on board with it.
Yeah, no, there was no irony in that or like, hey, I hate this guy. Let me like trick him into watching a terrible movie. That was like, I love it. You have to watch it.
I feel like that's what a lot of people do with this fight scene. I've heard so many people say it's one of the most realistic fight scenes ever.
What?
I kid you not.
What?
I've heard that too, and I think it's just because there's like grappling in it when every other fight scene is like just, or not every other, but many.
I felt
are
like
just
they needed to
punching and
work with
kicking.
more stunt coordinators because it totally looked like fake punches, and you saw the wrestling moves, and you're just like, okay, all
I
right.
mean, I think one of the reasons that it stands the test of time is because it's kind of bombastic and crazy and ridiculous and over
I
the
will
top.
admit, I was surprised that they actually look hurt. I did not expect that. But as we noted, they're also Wolverine and were healed within 10 minutes.
Well, even one of the ridiculous things is the fight is that Keith David, his character exits himself from the fight, leaves, goes to rest on a wall and says, I'm done with this, and then just gets totally sucker punched from behind and it continues on. It's like
a Peter Griffin fighting a chicken in Family Guy.
I honestly, to this day, think that that's probably what the inspiration for that sequence probably was.
I mean, it's so similar because it doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so I think I'll pivot this. We can ask our final question here. Matt, are you recommending this film to the good people out there in movie world?
People who've never seen it before?
Yeah, let's do both. You've seen it before. I don't even know how you did this. Yes, people who haven't seen it before, but give us both.
For people who haven't seen it before, I don't think they should probably watch it. I think maybe one of these days, if we get the They Lives remake, maybe it might be worth their time. I think the ideas in this movie are not bad ideas. Sometimes heavy-handed, sure, but I would love to see this done intelligently with great actors, maybe a little bit more of a budget, but not too much. I don't want like some blockbuster tentpole type movie. That movie would be entertaining to watch for somebody who hasn't seen the movie before. If you've seen the movie before and it's been a long time, I think it's worth watching just to remind yourself of what it actually is and not build up in your mind, because I feel like then you become that guy who talks to Bobby and recommends it. I think that you need to remind yourself that sometimes these movies aren't ironclad.
Bobby, what are you telling the world?
Can you start from like halfway through it and then go to the end and get the whole thing.
All right,
Like,
you need to get the minute
like-
marker. You need to tell the people where they need to start at.
right. I feel like you can skip, like, get the idea that, you know, he's a little bit weird from it and skip like maybe the first, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes and then move on with the rest of that. Or even better, maybe just get one of those like 10-minute supercuts on YouTube and get the idea
Yeah,
from that.
You just nailed my answer. I mean, for me, it's definitely watch it if you know the pop culture references and you just weren't aware of where they were coming from. Because this was a surprise for me. You know, I mentioned the Obey brand, clothing brand, was started from this. I had no idea. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I could not help but think about Duke Nukem when he said the bubblegum line. Like, that's exactly where my brain went. So it's always interesting to see the way, you know, pop culture uses these things, because like you mentioned, it was, I guess, bombastic enough to be pulled into, you know, the zeitgeist and how people look at things. It's, to me, you watch it because you're going, oh, now I understand where this came from. Outside of that, please don't watch this. There's better things to watch like this. Just save yourself some time. Do the YouTube thing.
There's better John Carpenter movies to watch for sure.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to go. Well, as always, thank you for listening, and remember the golden rule: he who has the gold makes the rules.